Peeps, it's Angela. Thanks for joining me today. I'm going to start by making my veneer for the top of my bangle. I'm going to use the largest template, which is 1.25 inches wide, and a strip of clay rolled out on a medium setting. This clay is the new Primo Turquoise Granite. Now, we're going to use a continuous silkscreen, and that means that the image starts and stops at the same place on the silkscreen. That way, when you line them up end to end, you get a continuous image, and it makes it easier when you're doing a project like this. This particular silkscreen is from ojoycreations.com. I'm going to use black acrylic paint, and I'm going to do the first section here, and then I'm going to clean and dry my silkscreen, allow the paint to dry on the veneer, and then I'm going to repeat the process. I'm going to end up needing to do it one more time for the full screen and then a partial, but between each time I do the imprint, I will wash and clean the silkscreen and let it dry thoroughly. Okay, I'm going to do a close-up and let you see what I'm talking about on lining the silkscreen up. I've already got my first silkscreen section on my plate here, and I'm ready to do the second one. So I'm going to line these up. There's tiny little fish on the bottom of the silkscreen and the top, and the imprint gives you a partial fish body. I'm just lining those up, and that's what you would do with any kind of continuous or repeating image silkscreen. And then once I have it lined up, then I'll do the black acrylic paint again, wash and dry the silkscreen, and then come back and do the very last imprint on it. I probably should mention that keep in mind that your silkscreen has openings that you might not be using, and be very careful when you're pulling your paint across the silkscreen not to drop it into an area that you don't actually want it to be in. This last section is pretty small, but I'm going to line it up the same way and finish off the imprint, and then that will complete the veneer, which will be the top piece of the bangle. Next, I'm going to use a sheet of black rolled out on a medium thick setting and the 1-inch template. This is going to make the interior band of my bangle. Your bangle will be about 1 inch wide when it is completed. Your raw clay will stick to the template a little bit, and that's just because it's clingy, and acrylic has a nice smooth surface for it to hang on to. So once you have your 1-inch band, you can texture it if you like, or you can silkscreen it, or any way you want to treat it. I'm just going to use a simple texture on the inside of this one. So rolling it out did stretch a little bit. I'm just going to trim it up and make it a manageable length. Because I have a big wrist, I'm going to build on the outside of the bangle form. And in order for this to be the interior of my bracelet, I need to put the design face down onto the template. If I was building from the inside, I would reverse it and the design would be visible. So it would be face up with the smooth side against the inside of the bangle form. It just depends on if you have a small wrist or a large wrist. It's a really flexible and size-friendly way to do a bangle. I'm not putting this on very tightly and trying not to use much pressure because the inside is textured and I don't want to flatten that texture. I'm just going to put it on and trim it. And then I'm going to just kind of smooth out the seam. It's going to be on the inside, so not really visible, but I want it as neat as possible. And then it needs to bake before I can move on. Now I'm going to take some scrap clay, roll down on my thickest setting, and use the 1 inch, the 3/4 inch, and the 1/2 inch templates to make the domed part of the bracelet, which I will then cover with the veneer we made earlier. I am leaving these a little bit longer than the template length, and that's just so I have an easy way to grab it and peel it off because the clay likes to stick to the loose side. Now I'm going to put some liquid clay around the surface of my form here that I have popped off. There is liquid clay on there. And now I'm taking the 1 inch piece of raw clay with the scrap clay and I'm applying it to it. I'm going to take the belay there and kind of bevel the cut so I don't have any kind of lumps. It doesn't have to be perfect, but the smoother it is, the better. And then I'm going to apply the 3/4 inch strip. I'm going to center it on the 1 inch strip. And then I'm going to center the 1/2 inch strip on top of the 3/4 inch strip. That way we've got all 3 sections of raw clay on and attached to the base of the bangle. And this is a square bangle. I'm just going to work it as I go just to try to keep it as uniform in shape as I can. Now that all the strips are applied, I'm just going to take my thumbs and start working the clay. I'm going to work it from the top down the sides, pressing out air as I go and making sure that it's as even as possible. The goal is to have a raised domed area with the thin strip being the height. So I'm going to work from the thin strip in the middle there, smoothing it out to the edges. At some point, I will slide it back onto the bangle form just because the only thing cured at this point is the inner strip and it's a little bit wobbly. And putting it back on the form will allow me to keep the shape easier. Okay, I've been working it now for probably about 5 minutes and I've put it back onto the form just as I get to the finalizing. Here, I'm just double checking all of the areas and making sure they're smooth and they're even and that I don't have any big lumps or dents or anything in it. And when I've got the shape completely smoothed out and I'm happy with it, I'm going to put it in the oven and bake it for 30 minutes. Okay, so I got my Bangle out of the oven and I tried it on, and it was too big, just a little bit looser than I wanted it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace the inner strip with another strip of black. So yeah, let your Bangle cool and try it on, and if you need to make an adjustment, now is the time to do it. So I've just got another strip of 1 inch wide. I've applied liquid clay, and I'm going to put this new strip over the strip that I had textured before. Because I had textured that piece, it's going to be important that I make sure that I press the new clay down inside that texture and get any air out. Um, and then once I have that done, I'm going to take a texture sponge and just go inside and give it a nice even texture all the way around. And then I'll use a blade and slice any hangover off the edges because I'm pressing it intentionally down into that texture. I know that the clay is going to spread and I'm going to have to do some cleanup. But this will make it a little bit better fit. I've got the inside done and I have not baked it yet. It is still raw, so I'm just being careful with how I handle it. I'm going to go ahead and apply some liquid clay all over the exterior here where my veneer is going to go. And you'll notice that I have my veneer upside down. I just find it easier to work with when I'm picking it up and trying to position it. Um, and then I'm going to center it over the top and take your time with putting your veneer on. Make sure that it's centered properly and then work it all the way around your bangle. You're going to want to press from the center to the edges to make sure that you get good connection. And when you get to the point where it's ready to match up your seam, if you need a little bit more length, you can gently pull it and it's not going to distort your image. Just gently do it. And as long as you don't need a massive amount of space, you should be fine. Butt your ends together and make your joint as smooth as you can. And then form your bangle edges. Taking your thumbs, go around it and just gently smooth it out from the center. That way you're going over your dome area and you're pressing out any air. And just keep working with that. If you need to come back after you're done and do a little cleanup with a blade, that's perfectly fine. You just want to make sure that you are absolutely happy with it at this point before you put it in the oven. I'm working around the edges and making sure that they're pressed tight. I want a good solid connection on the new clay that I'm putting on top of the baked clay. And then once I'm happy with the bangle, I will bake it. I'm going to bake it again for the full length of time. I'm going to bake this one for an hour. It's pretty thick and I want to make sure that it's cured thoroughly. Always keep in mind you can bake your pieces for much longer than you think you need to. And as long as your temperature is correct, it's not going to burn your piece. I do recommend that you bake anything tinted just to protect it. Your oven element will heat up at temperatures higher than what your clay can take. And if your oven element is near your piece and it's not tinted, you can get some scorching. So it's always a good idea just to tint your piece and be safe. You'll notice that I'm taking a lot of time to do this. And another thing I wanted to point out that even though this is silk screened acrylic paint, it's not super fragile. I'm touching it and moving it. I'm just doing it gently. The clay won't crack when you're doing this because it's clay and it's already smooth in condition. So what you want to watch for is your paint to crack. Now, sometimes that's a good effect and sometimes it's not. Just keep in mind when you're moving your veneer that it is a painted surface and you don't want to stretch it beyond its limits. As long as you handle it gently, you should be fine. Once my piece is cured and cooled, I will put a protective coat of DeepShine all the way around the bangle just to protect it and give it a nice high gloss. Keep in mind that DeepShine is designed for this type of thing. It works with curves. Thanks for hanging out with me, peeps. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. Shoot me any questions you have. You can find me on Facebook.